بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
الحمد لله نستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Okay, so continuing from in the previous video that we did on the meaning of the Kalimah of Tawheed. So this is the meaning of the Kalimah of Tawheed part 2. So number 3 out of the 4 things. So the first thing we had the meaning linguistically and in the Sharia of Taghut. The second thing we had the governing, what is it that makes a creation, up into a Taghut. And now we have number 3, the categories of Taghut. Okay, so something important here is that when it comes to the categories of Taghut, and when it comes to understanding anything, okay, is that we go back to the Salaf according to how the Salaf defined and understood it. This is what will give you the correct understanding of Taghut and how to avoid it, because many later people and scholars that have written about the topic of Taghut, and they have made many mistakes. And the reason for that is because they steered away from the path of the Salaf. So anyone who says Taghut is anything other than what the Salaf have said has basically gone off the path. So the Salaf have mentioned that Shaitan, and this was narrated by Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu anhu, Mujahid, al-Dhahhak, al-Sha'bi, Qatada, al-Suddi, and others. The tafsir of the Salaf will also have magician, the Sahir, and this was narrated by Abu al-Aliya. We have from the tafsir of the Salaf, they mentioned soothsayers or fortune tellers. This was narrated by Sa'id bin Jubair, Rufay' ibn Jurayj. We have a narration that the Taghut are idols are Taghut. This is narrated by As-Suddi. And we have narrations that mention that Ka'b bin al-Ashraf was a Taghut, and this is narrated by Ibn Abbas and al-Dhahhak. Now Ka'b bin al-Ashraf was basically one of the Jewish rabbis, one of the scholars of the Jews, and people would go to him to seek judgments and rulings. He would legislate Kufr, and he basically wrote books. So they have the Torah, the Torah that they follow, and then they basically, what they did was, the Jews, they wrote another book outside of the Torah, which is known as the Mesneh, and the ruling, and they made up new rulings and things like that. And then they would go by this book, and they would rule by this book rather than going back to the Torah. Just as what happens we see in this ummah as well, like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that this ummah would follow in the footsteps of those before. And so we have many times, for example, where, when it comes to different issues and masail, we should be going back to the Quran and the Sunnah according to the understanding of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and part of the Sahaba, the understanding of the Salaf and Salih. But people go back to later scholars and their encyclopedic works and fatwa, etc., against what the Salaf were upon. So what has also been narrated is that Taghut are those people who would sit in front of idols and speak for them, and they would speak lies to misguide people. Okay, so this was narrated by Ibn Abbas. So now let's look, what is it about all of these categories that were mentioned by the Salaf that makes them a Taghut? So when it comes to the Shaitan, he basically contests Allah in Allah's own right to be worshipped and in legislation. Okay, so this is what makes the Shaitan a Taghut. When it comes to the magician and the soothsayers, they contest Allah in his legislation, so they legislate Kufr for people, especially, in the past, magicians and soothsayers, people would go to them to seek judgment and legislation, and they would legislate Kufr for people. So that's one thing. And also they contest Allah in the knowledge of the unseen. So Allah is the only one who has knowledge of the unseen, and they claim to have this knowledge as well. So when it comes to idols, they contest Allah in his own right to be worshipped. That's obvious. Ka'b bin al-Ashraf, he contested Allah in legislation. And when it comes to those who would sit in front of idols, etc., they contested Allah in His sole right to be worshipped and in legislation. And we also have the narration of Imam Malik, where he said that anything that is worshipped other than Allah is a Taghut. Okay, so again, that's obvious. So anything that, in other words, is contesting Allah and His sole right to be worshipped. So some very important points now regarding the categories of Taghut, and this is kind of like a practical exercise in this as well. So many later people wrote about this topic, but the vast majority made mistakes due to not going back to the Salaf in issues of the Sharia. So the most famous of these were, who wrote about this topic, were Ibn Taymiyyah and Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab. So let's have a look at them. So Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Abdul Wahhab, they mention Taghut as follows. So let's see how they define the categories of Taghut. So number one, they mention Shaytan. They also mention the tyrant ruler. Number three, the one who accepts bribes in judgment. Four, the one who is worshipped and is happy with that. Number five, the one who acts without knowledge. And six, the one who judges by other than what Allah revealed. So this is how they, or these are the categories that they mentioned as Taghut. So let's see now. So they were correct in some of these, and in some of them they were mistaken. So firstly, when it came to Shaytan, that was correct. And when it comes to the one who is worshipped other than Allah, and he's happy with that. Okay, so these two they were correct in, and they were mistaken in the rest. Okay, and the reason why, how do we know this? Okay, so what they got correct was what was in agreement with the Salaf, as we saw previously, the categories of the Salaf that have been narrated from the Salaf. And what they made a mistake in was firstly due to going against what the Salaf said. Okay, so let's have a closer look then. So as for the saying of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, that the one who acts without knowledge, he even put this person as a Taghut. Okay, so no one from the Salaf ever said this. Okay, so no one ever categorized a person who acts without knowledge as a Taghut. And as for their saying the tyrant ruler, so i.e. the Muslim tyrant ruler who rules by the Sharia. Okay, so again, no one from the Salaf ever categorized this person. So a Muslim ruler who rules by Sharia, but he's a tyrant. No one categorized him as a Taghut except for the Khawarij. So the Khawarij, they did the fear of the ruler who was basically a tyrant. Okay, and you can refer to the video that we did on the Khawarij of the Muhakkima sect. Okay, it explains a bit more about that. So as for their saying, the one who judges by other than what Allah revealed, now this is a topic that we will do a separate video on, inshallah, because there's a lot more details that need to be understood. So we will not be going into that in this video. And as for Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab saying the one who accepts bribes in judgment, now this was narrated from Abdullah bin Mas'ud, the Sahabi, radiallahu anhu, and he said about this, the one who accepts bribes in judgment, that is Kufr. So he used the term Kufr, but okay, the understanding of the Salaf regarding this, as with other, statements like that the Sahaba made, is the Salaf understood this as a sin. Okay, and not as Kufr, let alone Taghut. Okay, so this is something important here, that not every kafir is a Taghut. So Taghut doesn't automatically, kafir doesn't automatically mean Taghut. Every Taghut is a kafir, but not vice versa. Okay, not every kafir is a Taghut. Okay, so when it comes to this point, the one who accepts bribes in judgment to the Salaf, they put this narration under the categories of sin, those things which take a person out of Iman into the level of Islam, but not out of Islam. Okay, but not as Kufr Akbar, major Kufr, and let alone Taghut. Okay, for example, we have in the book by Al-Khalal, Sunnah by Al-Khalal,